1939. A young actress on Broadway receives a phone call that could change her life forever. MGM Studios wants to meet with Tierney about starring in their upcoming adaptation of National Velvet. At 18 years old, Tierney is exactly the right age to play Velvet Brown, the horse-crazy English girl who disguises herself as a jockey to race in the Grand National. She's beautiful, talented, and has the youthful energy the role demands. The meeting goes perfectly. MGM executives are impressed by her screen test. The role is hers for the taking. But there's a problem. The studio needs more time to develop the script. Production will be delayed. Could Jean return to Broadway for now and come back to Hollywood when they're ready to film? Tierney says yes. She has no idea she's just made the biggest mistake of her career. 5 years later, in 1944, National Velvet finally begins production. But Tierney is no longer 18. She's 23, too old to convincingly play a young teenager. The role that should have launched her into Hollywood stardom goes instead to a 12-year-old unknown named Elizabeth Taylor. That little girl becomes one of the biggest movie stars in history. Tierney spends the rest of her career wondering what might have been. This is the story of perfect timing, devastating delays, and how 5 years can destroy a dream and create a legend. In 1939, Tierney was exactly what Hollywood was looking for. At 18, she possessed a rare combination of sophistication and youthful innocence that made her perfect for the transition from stage to screen. Born into a wealthy Connecticut family, Tierney had been groomed for success from childhood. She attended elite schools, studied drama, and made her Broadway debut at 19 in What a Life. Her beauty was striking, high cheekbones, piercing eyes, and an elegant bearing that photographed beautifully. Jean had everything, recalled casting director Billy Gordon years later. She was young enough to be believable as Velvet, but sophisticated enough to handle the dramatic demands of the role. She was born to be a movie star. When MGM purchased the rights to Enid Bagnold's novel, National Velvet, they envisioned it as a prestige production that would launch a new star. The story of a young English girl who disguises herself as a male jockey to race in the Grand National Steeplechase was both inspiring and commercially appealing. We needed someone who could ride horses, look convincing as both a girl and a boy in disguise, and carry an entire picture, explained MGM executive Irving Thalberg. Tierney seemed like the perfect choice. Tierney's screen test was remarkable. She demonstrated natural horsemanship, having ridden since childhood on her family's estate. She could handle the physical demands of the role while bringing emotional depth to Velvet's determination and dreams. Jean understood the character immediately, remembered test director George Cukor. She captured both Velvet's innocence and her fierce ambition. She made you believe that this girl could actually pull off such an audacious scheme. The role seemed tailor-made for Tierney's particular talents and image. At 18, she was young enough to be believable as Velvet, while being experienced enough as a performer to handle a starring role in a major production. This was going to be Jean's big break, said her agent at the time. We all knew National Velvet would make her a star. The role was perfect for her, and she was perfect for it. But Hollywood in 1939 was dealing with multiple complications that would derail Tierney's perfect opportunity. The studio system was in flux, scripts were constantly being rewritten, and production schedules were increasingly uncertain. MGM was trying to manage dozens of projects simultaneously, noted film historian David Thompson. They had good intentions, But the practical realities of production meant that projects got delayed, postponed, and sometimes forgotten entirely. When MGM told Tierney that production would be delayed, but that the role was still hers, she faced a difficult decision. Should she wait in Hollywood for filming to begin, or return to Broadway where she had guaranteed work and growing recognition? Jean's theater career was taking off, recalled Broadway producer Cheryl Crawford. She was getting offers for better roles, more money, more prestige. Waiting around Hollywood for a movie that might never get made seemed like career suicide. Tierney chose to return to Broadway, believing she could have both a successful theater career and the MGM role when production finally began. It seemed like the smart, practical decision. She had no way of knowing that those 5 years would transform her from the perfect choice into an impossible one. These forgotten stories deserve to be told. If you think so too, subscribe and like this video. Thank you for keeping these memories alive. What should have been a brief production delay turned into a 5-year nightmare of script problems, executive turnover, and World War II complications that completely derailed National Velvet and cost Jean Tierney the role of her lifetime. The first problem was the script. MGM's initial adaptation of Bagnall's novel was deemed unsatisfactory by studio executives who wanted more commercial appeal and clearer character motivation. Multiple writers were hired and fired as the project went through endless rewrites. The script kept changing, recalled Helen Deutsch, who eventually wrote the final screenplay. Every executive had different ideas about what the story should be. Some wanted more romance, others wanted more comedy. Still others wanted to focus entirely on the horse racing. The project kept getting pushed back while they tried to figure out what kind of movie they were actually making. The second major complication was the instability of MGM's executive structure. Irving Thalberg, who had championed the project, died suddenly in 1936. His replacement, Louis B. Mayer, had different priorities and wasn't personally invested in National Velvet. When Thalberg died, a lot of his pet projects got shelved, explained MGM historian John Douglas Eames. Mayer was more interested in immediate profit than prestige pictures, and National Velvet seemed like a risky investment. The outbreak of World War II in 1939 created additional complications for Hollywood studios. Resources were diverted to war-related productions, budgets were tightened, and many projects were canceled or indefinitely postponed. The war changed everything, noted film historian Thomas Schatz. Studios became much more conservative about green-lighting expensive productions. A period piece about English horse racing suddenly seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. Meanwhile, Jean Tierney was building a successful Broadway career that made waiting for MGM seem increasingly unnecessary. She starred in The Male Animal in 1940, which established her as a legitimate theatrical star and brought her to the attention of other Hollywood studios. Jean was becoming a bigger name on Broadway than she would have been in that one MGM picture, observed theater critic Brooks Atkinson. She was getting starring roles, critical acclaim, and better money than most Hollywood contracts offered. When other studios began courting Tierney, MGM's casual approach to National Velvet seemed even more frustrating. Why wait for one role when she could choose from multiple opportunities? Jean was fielding offers from Fox, Paramount, and Warner Brothers, her agent recalled. MGM's attitude seemed to be, wait around, we'll get to it eventually. That's not how you treat a rising star. By 1941, Tierney had signed with 20th Century Fox and was beginning her Hollywood career with Hudson's Bay. She was still technically under consideration for National Velvet. But MGM's continued delays made that increasingly irrelevant. "The window was closing," said Fox executive Daryl Zanuck. "Jean was becoming our star, and we weren't going to loan her out for a project that might never happen." When MGM finally got serious about producing National Velvet in 1943, they discovered that their perfect star was no longer available. And even if she had been, she was no longer right for the part. The 5-year delay that was supposed to improve the project had instead destroyed it and cost Jean Tierney the role that could have changed her entire career. By 1944, when MGM finally committed to producing National Velvet, Jean Tierney had aged out of the role that was once perfectly suited to her talents. At 23, she could no longer convincingly play a young teenager, no matter how talented she was. Jean was still beautiful, still talented, but she was wrong for the part now, admitted MGM casting director Billy Grady. Velvet Brown had to be believable as a child who could disguise herself as a boy jockey. Jean looked like a woman, not a girl. The 5-year delay had transformed the casting requirements entirely. What had been a perfect match between actress and role had become an impossible fit due to nothing more than the passage of time. "It was heartbreaking," recalled Jean Tierney years later. "The role that I'd thought of as mine for 5 years suddenly belonged to someone else, and there was nothing I could do about it. I'd gotten too old waiting for them to make up their minds." MGM found themselves back at square one, searching for a young actress who could embody Velvet Brown's unique combination of innocence, determination, and athletic ability. The studio began looking at much younger performers, including several child actresses. "We realized we needed to go younger," explained director Clarence Brown. "The character worked better as a genuine child rather than a young woman. It made the disguise more believable and the achievement more remarkable." Enter Elizabeth Taylor, a 12-year-old contract player who had appeared in minor roles, but hadn't yet found her breakthrough part. Taylor had the writing experience necessary for the role, having grown up around horses, and possessed an unusual maturity that made her capable of carrying a starring role. "Elizabeth was extraordinary," Brown recalled. "She looked like a child, but had the emotional depth of someone much older. She could be convincingly young while handling complex, dramatic scenes." The age difference between what Jean Tierney had been in 1939, 18, and what Elizabeth Taylor was in 1944, 12, was crucial. Where Tierney would have been playing younger than her actual age, Taylor was playing at her actual age level, creating an authenticity that elevated the entire production. "Elizabeth wasn't pretending to be a child," observed co-star Mickey Rooney. "She was a child, which made everything about her performance more genuine. When she was excited about the horse or determined to race, you believed it completely." The casting change also transformed the entire dynamic of the film. Instead of a story about a young woman pursuing her dreams, it became a story about a child achieving the impossible, a much more powerful and inspiring narrative. The younger casting made the story more magical, noted critic Pauline Kael. A 12-year-old winning the Grand National was a fantasy worth believing in. An 18-year-old doing it would have been just another sports movie. Elizabeth's natural relationship with horses also surpassed what the producers had hoped for from any actress. Her genuine love of riding translated into performances that couldn't be faked or taught. Elizabeth and the Pie, her horse in the film, had real chemistry, remembered horse trainer Corky Randall. She wasn't acting when she was with that horse. She was living every moment of it. The irony was devastating for Gene Tierney, but perfect for MGM. The delay that had cost them their original star had given them an even better one. An actress whose age and natural abilities made her ideal for the role in ways that even the most talented adult performer couldn't match. Elizabeth was born to play Velvet Brown, Brown concluded. Not because she was more talented than Gene Tierney, but because she was exactly the right age at exactly the right moment. The success of National Velvet vindicated MGM's eventual casting choice, while highlighting the devastating impact of timing on Gene Tierney's career trajectory. Elizabeth Taylor became a major star, while Tierney wondered about the path not taken. National Velvet was a massive commercial and critical success, earning over $5.8 million worldwide and establishing Elizabeth Taylor as one of Hollywood's most promising young stars. The film received multiple Oscar nominations and critical praise for Elizabeth's natural, unaffected performance. Elizabeth Taylor rings true on every line she speaks, wrote critic Pauline Kael. The 12-year-old delivers a performance that most adult actresses would envy. This is a star-making performance if there ever was one. For Elizabeth, the success of National Velvet created opportunities that shaped her entire career. MGM immediately began developing projects specifically for her, recognizing that they had discovered a unique talent with massive commercial appeal. After National Velvet, Elizabeth became MGM's most valuable young property, noted studio historian Lawrence Quirk. They built her entire career around the success of that one film. Gene Tierney, meanwhile, was building a respectable career at 20th Century Fox. But she couldn't help wondering how different her life might have been if National Velvet had been made on schedule in 1940. "I tried not to think about it," Tierney said in later interviews. "But every time I saw Elizabeth Taylor's name in the headlines, I couldn't help wondering if that should have been me. It was the role that got away, and it haunted me for years." The financial impact was significant. Elizabeth's success in National Velvet led to increasingly lucrative contracts and eventually made her one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood. Tierney's career, while successful, never reached those financial heights. Elizabeth's career trajectory after National Velvet was extraordinary, observed entertainment journalist Luella Parsons. She went from unknown child to major star based on that one performance. It's the kind of breakthrough that defines an entire career. Tierney's experience became a cautionary tale about the importance of timing in Hollywood careers. Her decision to return to Broadway while waiting for MGM seemed reasonable at the time, but ultimately cost her what could have been a career-defining role. Gene's story illustrates how precarious Hollywood careers can be, noted talent agent Irving Lazar. If you want more untold stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Your support means everything to us. One delayed production, one scheduling conflict, one executive decision can completely change an actor's trajectory. The psychological impact on Tierney was profound. She later struggled with depression and mental health issues that some attributed partly to career disappointments and missed opportunities. The roles that get away can be harder to handle than the roles you get turned down for, explained Hollywood psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson, who worked with many stars. When you know you were perfect for something and lost it through circumstances beyond your control, it can be devastating. Elizabeth Taylor, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the role's history until years later. When she learned that Gene Tierney had originally been cast, she expressed sympathy but also acknowledged that the timing had worked out for the best. "I was the right age for Velvet when they finally made the movie," Elizabeth said. "Maybe Gene would have been wonderful in 1940, but by 1944, it was meant to be my role." The contrast between their careers became more pronounced over time. Elizabeth became one of the most famous actresses in history, while Gene Tierney, despite her talent and beauty, remained a respected but second-tier star. Both women were talented, both were beautiful, both deserved success, observed film historian David Shipman. But Hollywood timing gave Elizabeth the opportunity that Gene had lost. The story of Gene Tierney's lost role in National Velvet raises fascinating questions about how different choices in timing might have altered the entire landscape of Hollywood history. If National Velvet had been produced in 1940 with Gene Tierney as planned, her career might have followed a completely different trajectory. Instead of becoming known primarily for film noir and sophisticated dramas, she could have been established as America's sweetheart in the tradition of stars like Judy Garland. Gene had the talent to be a major musical and family film star, observed entertainment historian James Robert Parrish. She could sing, she could dance. She had the wholesome appeal that MGM loved to promote. National Velvet could have made her into a completely different kind of star. The financial implications would have been enormous. Elizabeth Taylor's success in National Velvet led to a lifetime of lucrative contracts, eventually making her one of the highest-paid actresses in history. That financial trajectory could have belonged to Tierney instead. The money Elizabeth made throughout her career, starting with National Velvet, was staggering, noted Hollywood business manager Bo Roos. "We're talking about millions of dollars over several decades. That represents generational wealth that could have changed Gene Tierney's entire family legacy." More intriguingly, if Tierney had become MGM's major young star, Elizabeth Taylor's career might have developed entirely differently, or might not have happened at all. Elizabeth might have remained a child actress who never transitioned to adult stardom, speculated casting director Lynn Stallmaster. Her entire career was built on the foundation of National Velvet. Without that breakthrough, she might have had a completely ordinary life. The ripple effects extend beyond individual careers to the history of cinema itself. Elizabeth Taylor's star power influenced countless films and casting decisions over 6 decades. Her absence from major stardom would have changed the landscape of entertainment history. Elizabeth's presence shaped so many projects, noted producer David Brown. Films were written for her, deals were made around her star power. Other actors' careers were influenced by their relationships with her. Take that away, and you change the entire history of Hollywood. Gene Tierney herself remained philosophical about the missed opportunity in later years, though friends said it never stopped bothering her completely. "I learned that you can't spend your life wondering, what if?" she said in a 1980 interview. "I had a good career. I made films I was proud of. I had a family I loved. But I'd be lying if I said I never wondered what would have happened if National Velvet had been made on time." The story became a legend in Hollywood circles, often cited as an example of how timing and luck matter as much as talent in show business success. Gene Tierney's National Velvet story is required reading for anyone trying to understand how Hollywood really works, said talent agent Michael Ovitz. It shows that being perfect for a role means nothing if the timing isn't perfect too. Elizabeth Taylor, who learned the full story later in her career, expressed genuine regret that Tierney had suffered for her gain. "I wish there had been room for both of us," Elizabeth said in a 1990 interview. "Gene Tierney was a wonderful actress who deserved every opportunity. I was lucky that the timing worked out for me. But I understand how painful it must have been for her." The legacy of the casting change extends beyond individual careers to become a case study in the importance of decisiveness in business and entertainment. The 5-year delay that cost Gene Tierney her role shows what happens when companies don't act decisively, noted business historian Richard Tedlow. Opportunities have expiration dates, and MGM learned that lesson the hard way. Today, National Velvet is remembered as Elizabeth Taylor's breakthrough performance and the foundation of her legendary career. But for those who know the full story, it also represents one of Hollywood's most poignant tales of opportunity lost and destiny redirected. Every time you watch National Velvet, you're seeing not just Elizabeth Taylor's triumph, but Gene Tierney's tragedy, observed film critic Andrew Saras. It's a reminder that in Hollywood, as in life, timing is everything. The film that made Elizabeth Taylor a star serves as an eternal reminder that in show business, being talented isn't enough. Being available at the right moment, when the industry is ready for what you offer, matters just as much. Sometimes the greatest performances come from those who get the role. But sometimes the greatest stories come from those who don't. Behind Hollywood's golden facade, the biggest stars hid the darkest secrets. Every glamorous smile concealed scandals that would shock the world. If you want to uncover more hidden truths about classic Hollywood's biggest legends, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. The real stories are always more shocking than the movies.